So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this conference with le Cercle des Langues. I am Chanel, and I will be talking about the passive voice this evening, understanding and mastering its use. Please note that this evening's conference is level B1 to B2. The conference will last for 25 minutes. And for the last 5 minutes, we will have a answer and question session. So if you have any questions or comments that you would like to make, please put them into the chat. So let's go. In today's conference, we will be discussing 4 parts. We'll be discussing what is the passive voice. Passive voice in various tenses. How do we use the passive voice in context? And the last part of today's conference will be mastering the passive voice. So let's begin. So today we are going to take a look at one of the most important topics in the English language. Therefore, from this point on, we suggest that you take notes of the rules and tips that you will find throughout the conference. What is the passive voice? The passive voice is a grammatical structure used when the subject of the sentence is not performing the action, but instead he receives or they receive the action. This contrasts with the active voice, where the subject is the doer of the action. So let's go a little bit deeper. The passive voice is formed using be plus the past participle, often used when the action or the recipient of the action is more important than the doer, who is the agent. Let's look at some examples. So in active voice, the teacher explained the rules. In passive voice, the rules were explained by the teacher. In active voice, they will build a new hospital. In passive voice, a new hospital will be built. In active voice, someone cleaned the room. In passive voice, the room was cleaned. Why do we use the passive voice? Reasons for using the passive voice include focusing on the action or the result. So, for example, the vaccine was discovered in 1796. The focus is on the discovery. If we had to make the sentence a random name, John Mayer discovered the vaccine in 1796, that means that John Mayer will have more focus than the fact that the vaccine was discovered. So we put the vaccine at the beginning of the sentence and it becomes the focus. When the doer, so the second reason is when the doer is unknown or unimportant. For example, the window was broken. We don't need to say who did it. The most important thing was that the window was broken. And the third reason for using the passive voice is to sound formal or impersonal. For example, mistakes were made, used in a professional setting or diplomatic statements. So if, for example, you are in a meeting, instead of saying, Jane didn't do the presentation, we can say, the presentation was not done or was not completed. So you have a more diplomatic approach. So let's look at some of the key differences between active and passive voice. Active voice, the subject does the action. Example, a cat chased the mouse. In passive voice, the subject receives the action. The mouse was chased by the cat. So now let's look at our tenses, because this is the most important part. How does passive voice change in different tenses? So let's look at the present tense passive. And when you think of the present tense, we are now looking at the present simple. So we start with the verb to be, am, is, or are, and then the past participle. So remember, the past participle stays the same. It's the form of am, is, or are that will continue to change with the tenses. So the book is read by students. These decisions are made every week. The metro is taken by the citizens. So if we look at the first sentence, we can say, students read the book. Students read the book. So read is my clue. Read tells me, okay, this is in the present tense. So now for it to be passive voice, I need to keep my auxiliary, am, is, or are in the present tense and use read. I now need to change it to the past participle. So your first verb is going to tell you a lot about that sentence. Past tense passive. So now, as you can see, our am, is, and are has become was and were, plus your past participle. The cake was baked by the chef. The houses were damaged during the storm. The presentation was done by the teacher. Let's go back to the first example. The chef baked the cake. So baked is now in the past simple. So I know that in my passive voice, my main auxiliary, my verb to be, is now going to be in the past simple. And then I will add my past participle. The cake was baked by the chef. The perfect tenses in the passive voice. Present perfect. With present perfect, we now have the verb to have, has or have, and it becomes been, because we need to remember with the passive voice, the verb to be is a big part. It is the main part of the verb. So because I have the present perfect, to have will always be part of the tense, but I have, has, been, plus my past participle. The homework has been completed. In the past perfect, it becomes had been with the past participle. The decision had been made before the meeting. Let's look at our modal verbs in the passive voice. Your form, you will have the modal plus be plus the past participle. For example, the problem can be solved. The rules must be followed. So you are seeing a continuous pattern of the verb to be. It is always present. So using the passive voice in context. Passive voice in daily life. The groceries were delivered this morning. The invitation was sent yesterday. The invitations for the wedding were sent last week. The car was washed while we were out. Dinner has already been prepared by the chef. The lights were turned off before we left the office. In academic writing, you'd find that the passive voice is common in reports, science, and technical writing. The passive is used to focus on the process or the result rather than the person performing the action. The results were analyzed using statistical software. The research paper was published in a peer-reviewed journal. Data was collected from multiple sources for accuracy. The samples were examined under a high-resolution microscope. We also find the use of the passive voice in news and media. It is used to shift the focus to the event or the action, often leaving out the agent for brevity. For example, the suspect was arrested after a thorough investigation. Several areas were affected by severe flooding last week. The match was cancelled due to bad weather. A new bridge is being constructed to connect the islands. We also use the passive voice in formal communication. It is often used in business or official writing, where the agent is unimportant or obvious from the context. For example, the project was approved. All orders have been shipped and are expected to arrive tomorrow. A formal apology was issued by the company. The contract has been signed and will be effective next month. If we go back to a formal apology was issued by the company, you can see how it places importance on the apology. If we had to say the company issued an apology, our focus would still remain with the company. And so in this way, by making the apology more important, it carries more weight. So how do we master the passive voice? As you have seen so far, mastering the passive voice will allow you to communicate properly in many different contexts. So let's see the final details. So with passive voice in questions, we focus on the be plus the subject plus the past participle, because it is the inversion method, meaning we put the auxiliary first, then the subject, and then the past participle. For example, was the problem solved? Has the order been placed? Is the task completed? Has the payment been processed? When to avoid the passive voice? So there are situations that would likely be better with the active voice. We need to pay attention to the overuse of the passive voice, as the overuse can make writing less direct and clear. So let's look at a poor example. The homework was completed by John. A better response would be John completed the homework, because in this sense, in this context, we want John to be acknowledged for having completed the homework. Passive construction often adds unnecessary words. For example, the decision was made by the team during the meeting. Whereas a better response would be, the team made the decision during the meeting. So, as we are saying, we can use the passive voice, but it is important to know when to use it, as to not overuse it and add unnecessary details. So here we have a passive voice exercise, and I would love your opinion. We are going to rewrite the next sentences in the chat using the passive voice. So let's start with the first one. The students organized the event. How would we change this into the passive voice? Let me know what you think. Okay, so we have the event was organized by the students. Wonderful. The event was organized by the students. Absolutely beautiful response. Let's look at the second. She will finish the report tomorrow. She will finish the report tomorrow. The report will be finished tomorrow. Beautiful. Absolutely. So everyone was correct. The report will be finished tomorrow. So you can see this constant use of the verb to be. Let's look at number 3. The chef prepared a delicious meal. The chef prepared a delicious meal. A delicious meal was prepared by the chef. Thank you, everyone. Absolutely wonderful. They are painting the house now. They are painting the house now. So this one is a little trap. So because we see painting, what does that tell us? We see painting, so it's continuous. Okay, so we are going to look at the answer afterwards with that one. Let's try the last one. The team will announce the results next week. The team will announce the results next week. So the results will be announced by the team next week. Thank you, Laurent. So yes, let's have a look at some of the correct answers, especially for the second last. So if you got these sentences, we congratulate you. The event was organized by the students, correct? The report will be finished tomorrow. A delicious meal was prepared by the chef. The house is being painted by them now. The results will be announced by the team next week. So if we look at that second last one, why is it the house is being painted? Because the original sentence said painting, and we look to that verb and see it's ing. That means it's a continuous tense. That means we need to keep it in the continuous tense. The house is being painted. Well done, everybody. You did so amazingly. In conclusion, the passive voice is going to help you emphasize actions and outcomes. making your communication more versatile. With practice, you will use it confidently in daily life, writing, and formal contexts. Remember, focus on the action, master the structure, and keep practicing. Thank you everyone for joining me in tonight's conference. Do you have any questions or comments that you would like to make? Please feel free to unmute your microphones now, just to share if you would like to.
No, it's okay for me. Thank you, Chanel.
My absolute pleasure, Laurent. Thank you everyone for joining me. I will send everybody the PDF after this class so that you can look at these examples and see if we understand, especially how the tense changes. Okay? So have a wonderful evening and a beautiful weekend, and I will see you next week. Thank you, everybody.